clock struck midnight and the hospital was eerily quiet. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows down the empty hallways. Nurse Emily Carter adjusted her scrubs and sighed, glancing at the patient chart in her hands. It was her third night shift in a row and the exhaustion was starting to weigh on her. But tonight felt different. The air was heavier, the silence more oppressive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Emily made her way to the fourth floor, where the long-term care patients were housed. The elevator doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. She stepped out, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The walls seemed to close in around her, and the faint sound of whispering reached her ears. She paused, straining to listen. The whispers were faint, almost imperceptible, but they were there, murmurs of voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Emily shook her head, blaming her lack of sleep. "Get it together, Emily," she muttered under her breath. Her first stop was room 412, where Mr. Grayson, an elderly patient with dementia, was resting. As she entered the room, she noticed the temperature had dropped significantly. The air was icy, and her breath formed small clouds in front of her. Mr. Grayson was asleep, his chest rising and falling steadily. Emily checked his vitals and adjusted his IV, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. That's when she heard it again, the whispers. This time, they were louder, more distinct. She turned toward the sound, her heart pounding. The voices seemed to be coming from the far corner of the room, near the closet. Emily hesitated, then slowly approached the closet door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. Before she could open it, a loud thud echoed from inside, making her jump back. The whispers grew frantic, overlapping into a cacophony of voices. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, but her training kicked in. She had to make sure nothing was wrong. She yanked the closet door open, and the whispers stopped abruptly. The closet was empty, save for a few spare linens and a mop bucket. Emily let out a shaky breath, laughing nervously at herself. "You're losing it, girl," she said, closing the door. But as she turned back to Mr. Grayson's bed, her blood ran cold. The old man was sitting upright, his eyes wide open and staring directly at her. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Instead, the whispers returned, louder than ever, emanating from his throat. Emily stumbled back, her mind racing. This couldn't be real. It had to be a trick of the light, a side effect of her exhaustion. Mr. Grayson's head tilted unnaturally to the side, his neck cracking audibly. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, and the walls of the room seemed to pulse and shift as if they were alive. Emily turned to run, but the door slammed shut on its own. She yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers surrounded her, pressing in from all sides. She covered her ears, but the voices were inside her head now, filling her mind with incomprehensible words that made her skull ache. The room grew darker, the shadows stretching and twisting into grotesque shapes. Emily sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The room was silent, the lights flickering back to their normal brightness. Mr. Grayson lay peacefully in his bed, asleep once more. Emily sat on the floor, trembling, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She didn't tell anyone about the incident. Who would believe her? But as the nights went on, the whispers returned, growing louder and more insistent. Other nurses began to notice strange occurrences, equipment malfunctioning, patients speaking in languages they shouldn't know, shadows moving on their own. The hospital became a place of dread, its walls seemingly alive with a malevolent presence. Emily tried to quit, but something kept pulling her back. The whispers called to her, promising answers to questions she didn't even know she had. And one night she finally gave in. She followed the voices to the hospital's abandoned basement, where the walls were covered in strange symbols and the air was thick with the stench of decay. There, in the darkness, she found the source of the whispers, a gaping hole in the wall, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. The voices beckoned her closer, promising her the truth. And as she reached out to touch the wall, the hole swallowed her whole. The next morning, Emily was gone. No one could explain her disappearance. But if you work the night shift at that hospital, you might hear the whispers too. And if you're not careful, the walls might just claim you as well. Expanding the story, the animated series. The animated adaptation of true night shift horror stories would bring Emily's terrifying experience to life with chilling visuals and atmospheric sound design. Each episode would explore a different night shift worker's encounter with the supernatural, tying their stories together through the mysterious hospital and its dark history. Visual style. The animation would have a dark, gritty aesthetic with muted colors and heavy shadows. The hospital would feel like a character itself, its hallways twisting and shifting to create a sense of claustrophobia. The whispers would be visualized as swirling, ghostly tendrils that seep through the walls, growing more intense as the tension builds. Sound design. The series would rely heavily on sound to create an unsettling atmosphere. The whispers would be layered with eerie, discordant tones, making it impossible to tell if they're real or in the character's mind. The creak of doors, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the distant echo of footsteps would all contribute to the sense of dread. Character arcs. Each episode would delve into the personal lives of the night shift workers, revealing their fears, regrets, and secrets. These vulnerabilities would make them more susceptible to the hospital's malevolent forces, adding depth to their stories. Lore and mystery. Over the course of the series, clues about the hospital's dark past would be revealed. Perhaps it was built on the site of an ancient burial ground, or maybe it was the scene of a horrific experiment gone wrong. The whispers would be tied to a larger, overarching mystery, culminating in a climactic finale where the truth is finally uncovered. Interactive elements. The animated series could include interactive elements, such as hidden symbols or messages in the background, encouraging viewers to piece together the mystery alongside the characters.